Let's look at how to insert patterns into a drawing. Landscape has a couple of pattern tools. One of them is more landscape type patterns. The first one here, the one that looks like a brick wall, it has patterns for bricks and flagstone and ground cover and stuff like that. The other one is more of a generic type patterns, more lines and things like that. Both have their uses, and basically once you find the pattern that you wish to use, you need to know how to insert it correctly. Now there's a number of different scenarios that you might come across when you're trying to insert a pattern. And when you're inserting patterns into your drawing, it's important to understand what a pattern tool needs. Basically what a pattern tool needs is an enclosed area, meaning it has to be enclosed on all four sides. And depending on which tool you use, those four sides have to connect end to end. And I'll show you what I mean. To insert a pattern, let's briefly talk about the pattern tool itself and the patterns that are available and how to pick them. When you pick on the pattern tool, it opens up a modifier with scale that you can set, rotation you can set, group and random spin. These should all be checked. A group should be checked, random should be turned off, so the default should stay. We got a list of patterns here that you can pick from, quite a few to choose from. To get thumbnails of them, you can open up to see 6 at a time, and you can sort of scroll through the list and pick the one that you want to use for your drawing. I'm going to stick with the default tumbled B. Click OK. That's going to be my pattern that I'm going to use. I'm not worried about the scale at this point. I just want to learn how to insert them. First thing you do, choose your layer to put it on. I'm going to put mine on the pattern layer. Your pattern should all go on the pattern layer. It's important, especially when working with modes, to get them on the correct layer. And to insert them, I have 3 different scenarios here. This is a scenario where my lines are overlapping each other. They're extending past each other. Here they're joined end to end. One of these is a polyline that's closed. One of them is individual line segments, and I'll show you how they all work. This one here, this is one of those individual line segments. In order for me to insert this hatch into here, I need to left-click on all the objects that make up the boundary. When I've selected them all, once I've done that, I right-click and it will insert the pattern into that area. If the area is a continuous line, I'll only need to select it once, and the whole perimeter highlights, and I right-click and I can insert it in there. I can do the same thing for this one. I can select the perimeter, but because these ones overlap each other, it's going to give me some trouble, meaning that the hatch tool thinks that the boundary goes all the way to here, whereas we really intend it to go to there. So in this scenario, there's a couple of things that you can do. I'm just going to back out of this one for a minute and zoom in on that area and show you a couple things that you could do. One of the things that, probably the easiest thing to do, is to create a new closed area, possibly by tracing or getting close to this area here with a closed polyline. And one way to do that is to go to the temp layer, which is basically where you put all your temporary lines that you just need for performing certain functions like this. Select your polyline tool and choose the closed polyline option. Now, what I'd recommend is, instead of having constraints and inference on, I basically just freehand just inside the area that you want to put the pattern into. That way you can select it a little bit easier than when it's right on top. And create a closed area for my pattern to go in. Now I can select my pattern tool, select my pattern, and then I can select that inside line that I drew on the temp layer. I should actually change my layer to pattern, and then insert the pattern on there on that layer. And when I go to design mode, it turns the temp layer off. If I want to get at all my temp layers and change them or erase them, I just go to my temp layer mode and I can erase that temp layer. And it's gone. I don't need it anymore. Go back to design mode, and there's my pattern. The other way that I can do this, I'm going to remove this one for a second. The other way I can do that is, sometimes you're in a scenario where, well, sometimes you can trim these lines back to create that closed area. That doesn't always work, because sometimes those lines could mean this could be a walkway and this could be the driveway line that goes all the way down to the road. I can't trim that off. I need that line there. So what do? I can use another tool that we haven't talked about yet. It looks like the trim tool, except it doesn't have that little scissor in the corner that the trim tools do. It looks the same. It does roughly the same things, but instead of removing a line, it'll just break the line at the next intersection. So this tool I could use to click on this line here and then right click doesn't change, but if you go back to it, you'll see that it's actually broken that line at these 2 points. I can do the same thing for each of these lines, and now I've got individual line segments that I can select that make up only the boundary of the area that I want to hatch, and I can select those to put the pattern into. Of course, I had clicked on design mode, which set my layer to text layer, so I can change that to pattern and then drop the pattern in again. There's actually one more way in which I can insert patterns into a scenario like that. The problem with this other one I'm going to show you is that it's a little bit more complex and it has more potential for problems, but in simple shapes it'll work really well. And I'll create that same scenario again where I've got overlapping lines. Actually, I'll turn my constraints to none, didn't want those on, and draw overlapping lines that you might come across in some scenario. I'm going to select my pattern layer for my pattern to go on, and you'll notice that this tool also has a blue triangle, meaning that it has nested tools underneath it. If I click on that and hold that my mouse button down, you can see that there's a number of different tools underneath it, including the one that's beside it, and some of them have a blue dot in the middle of them. The ones with the blue dot in the middle of them require you to insert the pattern in a different way. So let's try that one there. Basically how this one works is that you get the same modifier to select your patterns and scales, but to insert the pattern it's slightly different. It says select the location inside the area to be hatched. So basically the way this one works is that you click inside once, left click inside the area, and you'll see that it highlights the area that it can find in blue, and then right click and it will insert the pattern. So the problem with that one is that there are a number of scenarios that will cause this not to work. So it's a little bit more advanced if you have a very complex area. The easiest way to do it when you're first starting out is to create that temporary closed area on the temp layer. For example, I have a walkway like this one down here. It's made up of a number of different shapes. Now I've drawn this accurately, so this tool with the blue dot in the center will work here because I know that I've drawn it correctly where I've got all closed corners, even though they're all made up of different lines and lines that go beyond each other. I can left click once in the middle of it. It finds the edges for me. I can right click and insert that pattern into it. Now what if you had an object on your walkway like a planter or a curved stone bench or something like that that you wanted to hatch around? How do you go about and do that? Let me erase the pattern here for a minute and insert an object into the walkway to show you how to hatch around it. I'm going to go to my site furniture library. I'm going to select a curved stone bench as an example here. I'm going to place it into my walkway like that, position it. Now I want to create a pattern around it. If I were to just use this tool here that allows you to pick the middle of the area and it finds the edges for me, let me put it on the correct layer for a minute. Go to my pattern A, drop it in. It's going to go right over top of that library figure because it's a figure and it's floating in the middle of it. I need to create a contained area around it first before I hatch it. So let me undo that. I'm going to do the same method that I did earlier where I create a temporary line around the outside of that bench, and I'm going to use that to be my boundary for the bench so it doesn't get hatched. I'm going to click on my temp layer here, grab my polyline tool, use the close polyline option here, and I don't have to be super accurate, just enough to keep the pattern from going over top of it. Don't forget the pattern is fairly open, it's grayscale, so you don't have to be 100% precise for this. This is going to be close enough. Then I'll do the same thing for my walkway. To make it easy, I'm just going to go around the outside as close as I can without getting too tight and just go around like this. Because I'm going to erase this line later, you're not going to see it, and you're not going to even notice that the pattern is not 100% right up against the edge. So now that I've done that, I've got my boundary for my bench and for my walkway. I'm going to go back to the first tool that we had talked about. I'm going to select my pattern. I'm going to select my layer to put it on. Then I'm going to select the area around my walkway and around my bench. So I select that one first. Like if I were to just right click now, it would go over top of it. But if I were to left click on the boundary of my walkway and the boundary of my bench, and then right click, it'll deselect the area that contains my bench and hatch around it. Then all I need to do is go to my temp layer mode, just to turn the temp layer on, erase those objects, go back to design mode, and I'll have my pattern around on my walkway that goes around my bench. What's missing on this walkway is a soldier course around the perimeter that you normally see on a paving stone walkway. So how do you do that? Let's look at how that's done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to erase my bench and my pattern and show you how to create a soldier course around the outside. What we're going to do is we're going to turn our copy toggle on, and we're going to turn constraints to none. Now, I'm going to create a soldier course here that's basically an 8-inch wide typical brick border around the outside. I'm going to use the offset tool to do that. That's why I turn copy on. I'm going to make this 8 inches away, and I'm going to select the objects that I know are attached end to end. I know that this walkway and this porch join together at the corner, so I can offset those two both at the same time. If not, I have to offset them separately, like this line here that represents my driveway. I've also got a line around the outside of my house, which is really hard to grab, but that's really hard to do, so I don't need that. I've already got this line here. I can pull this one up using the trim tools that we learned about earlier. I'm going to choose the trim to a corner tool here, which will allow me to take this line and trim it to this one to a corner. So I've got that one trimmed up there. I'm going to take this line here and trim it to this one there, and it'll trim it to a corner. Now I've got a line that represents my border on my walkway. I'm going to revise that line to the pattern or border layer, which is a gray dotted line that matches the lightness of the pattern so that it doesn't overpower the drawing, look like a curb. Then I'm going to grab a brick pattern or brick that I'm going to use to insert into the soldier course. Pavers library. I'm going to choose the first brick. I like this brick mainly because it has an insertion point right in the middle, and I'm going to put this along the outside. Now the slow way would be to drop them in one at a time like that, which is really hard to do. We're going to use the offset figures tool to create this soldier course. What I want to have is a continuous line around the outside in the middle of my soldier course, because that's where my insertion point is on my brick here. So I need to create a line halfway to the middle of this border for that brick soldier course to be placed on. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to offset those lines in half the distance of my border, which is 4 inches. And then the problem here is that these are all separate lines. What I should be doing really is joining these lines together first. And I'm going to use what's called the join tool, which you haven't really seen yet. It will join lines together that are touching end to end. It'll join them together. So it'll turn those two lines into one, and turn these two lines also into one. So this now becomes, if I hit escape, a continuous line that goes all the way around the outside. Now when I offset that, that becomes one line, and when I insert the figure along that line with this tool, it'll be all joined together and go in as one. So now I'm going to offset 4 inches. And I'm going to grab that line. I'm going to make sure when I use the join tool, the copy toggle gets turned off. So we got to turn that back on. Left click on the line, which I've done already. Right click, and then left click on the side that I want to offset it to. I selected it here, so I should choose the outside of there to click on so that it moves it 4 inches outside. Next, I select my offset figures tool. When I bring my figure out of my library, I just place it as is. I don't rotate it because it will automatically rotate it along that line, so it's perpendicular to my soldier course. I need to know what my offset distance is. So this takes a little bit of practice, trial and error. I know that this is about a 5-inch offset for this particular brick. Click on the brick, click on the soldier course, and it basically drops that soldier course all the way around the outside. And I can zoom in on that, and I can erase that temporary figure and erase the line that I used to create it, and now I've got a soldier course around the outside. Now because this line is joined together as one line, I can use this tool here to select that line that represents my walkway and drop the pattern into the walkway, and you'll see that the pattern, the soldier course, and the border around it are all on the same layer, have the same effect, a grayscale effect, where it doesn't overpower your drawing, stays nice and light, yet still visible.